Testing, okay. That loud enough?
Yes.
It's the summer of 1965. I'm participating in a training exercise in the Special Forces Training Group. At the moment, I'm guarding our equipment alone at night in the North Carolina woods. It's dark as Vladimir Putin's soul and dead silent, not a whisper of a breeze. Some exercises include ambushes, so I'm vigilant, though who knows what I could do alone if I was attacked. I don't use a light, since it would betray my position. Time passes uneventfully, but my senses are still on alert. Then I notice a slight rustle. Is that a small animal in the leaves? It stops. Then it resumes. Is someone sneaking up on me? Boy, are my senses fired up. I'm so concerned, I unconsciously hold my breath. Nothing. Am I imagining this? The cycle repeats. Slight rustle, acute vigilance, nothing. Again a rustle. I'm so intent on detecting the source, I unconsciously hold my breath, and nothing follows. Until I eventually notice the sound only occurs when I breathe. It's my abdomen rubbing against my blouse when I breathe. Ooh, for the first time, I forcibly exhale and laugh. Next up is Wendy Weiss, who has written Mild Melancholy with a Twist.
It's a hard act to follow, particularly when my topic is mild melancholy. But before I get into it, I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank first John Driscoll and Lynette and her crew for having done just a terrific job in organizing. Also thank Sandra. You heard what she does, and I think for all of us would say she's helped bring out a lot of what is inside of us, better than we could do on our own, and also has greatly improved the way we do it. And I think that is it for the acknowledgement. Oh, the other thing I wanted to make sure I mentioned, I think, again, other people in the group will probably feel this way. It is a huge privilege to be part of this group. We really just have developed together. So anyway, thank you to all of you. So now for mild melancholy with a twist. Some mornings when I'm walking on my own, I listen to the modern jazz quartet pianist, John Lewis, playing Bach fugues and preludes. Lewis's music has a melancholy feel, and maybe it's because of that, or maybe because of a memory I have of John Lewis from a long time ago, that his delicate piano rendition of these Bach fugues evokes images of connections I wish I'd made. I'll describe 4 examples of those missed opportunities, and then we'll tell you what I wish had happened instead. The final example is loosely related, but too satisfying to leave out. Example 1, what happened? It's 1967, early fall. I arrive at one of our favorite restaurants in DC, where we've been living for the past year, ever since Elliot, that's my husband, took a job with the U.S. Agency for International Development. I'm in my 7th month with our first child, and I'm very self-conscious about my size. Just as we're escorted to our table, I spot Sherman Hawkins, the wonderful Shakespeare professor who taught at Bryn Mawr College for a year. I was one of the quieter students in that class, but something I wrote in an exam caught his attention, and he referred to it in a subsequent lecture. I considered going over and telling him that I was in his class a few years before at Bryn Mawr and that I loved it. But I hesitate. I can't bring myself to do it. For the rest of the evening, I'm preoccupied with regret. What I wish had happened. I see him, go over and introduce myself, and tell him that I took his class at Bryn Mawr a few years before, and that it was one of my favorites. He looks at me for a minute, and then he says, "I remember you. You're the girl who made such an interesting observation when we read Timon of Athens," if anybody ever heard of that play, but that's a separate issue. Example 2, what happened? It's the summer of 1976. Elliot and I and our children, 9 and 7, are in Martha's Vineyard. We've stopped at a large indoor market after a day at the beach. At the far side of the market, I see Ellen Edwards, or at least I think it's her. Ellen and her husband Rob, who worked at the Ford Foundation, were neighbors and friends in Islamabad when we were posted there from 1968 to 1972. Peter, our son, and Eliza, their older daughter, played together from the time they were 18 months until they were 4, brought together by their respective ayahs. The Edwards left Pakistan before we did. We didn't keep in touch, but later I heard through mutual friends that Ellen and Rob had divorced. When I spot Ellen, I become aware of my greasy face, my messy hair, my bathing suit, covered by a long t-shirt, and I'm wearing glasses, not my contact lenses, which for some reason really bothers me. I probably would not be happy running into anyone I knew, but Ellen and Rob were definitely upper class, attending boarding schools before college, like many girls in my college class. Foolishly, I thought they might not know I was Jewish. Growing up on the main line, the edges of main line in Philly, as I did, Jewish girls were very aware of the hierarchy that placed us on a lower rung than, say, the Debs. So, is it because of the social class and ethnic discomfort I sometimes felt around Ellen and Rob? Or is it my self-consciousness about the way I look that I don't call out to Ellen? Later, I feel ashamed of myself and don't tell Elliot that I've seen her. I think if I were to get another opportunity, I would surely speak to her. And then there is another opportunity. But this time, we're in the car, coming off the ferry, and she's standing on the side, apparently waiting for someone. But I don't ask Elliot to stop the car. What I wish had happened. When I see Ellen in the market, I rush over to her and say, "Ellen," making sure it's really her. I have absolutely no self-consciousness. I'm just so glad to see her. We greet each other with a big smile, with disbelief about running into each other after all these years. I ask about Eliza and Daphne, where she's living now. We make plans to get together. There's so much catching up to do. Excuse me. Example 3, what happened? It's an afternoon in summer of 1981. Elliot and I and the kids are in the Tivoli Gardens. We're in Copenhagen for the day, on our way to Stockholm, where we'll meet Torrin and Peter Haggard, friends from Pakistan. We've come to the gardens to relax. It's 5 in the afternoon. We sit on the patio to have a drink and order a snack for the kids. There's hardly anyone else around, but on an elevated stage, a man quietly plays the piano. Elliot remarks that the man is John Lewis from the Modern Jazz Quartet. The names don't mean anything to me then, but the music is magical. What I wish had happened. When I think of that afternoon in the Tivoli Gardens, I often imagine that John Lewis was feeling invisible and maybe even lonely up on that stage. Of course, it's possible he was rehearsing for an anticipated packed crowd later that evening, or that he was actually enjoying the solitude of those moments. Still, especially now that I love his recordings, I wish I had taken the opportunity to tell Mr. Lewis how much we appreciated the beauty and elegance of his playing. Example 4, what happened? It's 1994, and we've lived in Tucson for a year. I'm recovering from a fractured pelvis sustained in a cycling accident. I'm co-hosting a gathering with a colleague, planned well before the accident, and I'm at Safeway at Swan and Sunrise, picking up my part of the supplies. Although I'm mostly using crutches these days, I've used a motorized cart to help me shop. At checkout, back on the crutches, I ask for someone to help me to the car. We're just loading up the last bags into the cart when on the front side of the checkout line, I see John Updike. I'm positive it's him. He's not in line, he's just standing there looking a bit lost. I freeze for a moment. I love John Updike's work, and I want to go and tell him that. But my cart is loaded, the helper is ready to go, the store is very crowded, and I'm on crutches. So I leave. What I wish had happened. I say to the helper, please excuse me for a moment. There's a very famous author over there, and I want to speak to him for a minute. If you can wait for me, great. But if not, just leave my stuff outside the door. Somehow, I get through the crowded aisles and get to Updike before he walks away. I tell him I'm a big fan and just heard him speak at a Family Therapy Networker conference. I welcome him to Tucson and offer to help him in any way I can. And the helper is waiting for me when I exit the store. The final example is a fun sighting, absolutely no regrets. This time, I'm in the checkout line at Bash's, at Colburn Sunrise. And if you've been to Bash's, just picture yourselves in the aisle closest to the deli counter, just farthest over that way, south side. Okay. I happen to glance up to my left and see a head towering above the aisle. I turn to the cashier, a middle-aged guy with the manager button, and say to him, "There's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar." He looks at me as if he's thinking, "Lady, give me a break." But then he looks up in the right direction and he says, "Holy shit." That made my day. Thank you, and now I'm pleased to introduce Norma Cohen, who will speak. Her presentation is Strawberry Fields Forever.
Good morning. Hopefully this will work, and I'll remember to keep it right here. Okay. If you have never tasted a freshly picked strawberry from one of the overflowing farm stands in Oxnard alongside the 101 freeway, you have never truly experienced the joy of early summer. Bright red, slightly warm from the sun, juicy, just sweet enough as you take that first bite. The chorus from that 1960 Beatles song has been running through my brain on repeat ever since I saw the TV footage of the farm workers running through a huge strawberry field. It looked like one of the Oxnard fields, and excuse me, and the newscaster said they were running from ice. I saw some bright red peeking through the between green leaves in the neat rows of plants, strawberries waiting to be picked. Who was going to pick them now? Those men running through the fields might not be back anytime soon, if they even got away. This second image I keep replaying is my mental picture of Jesus, who, along with my ex-brother-in-law, ran the back of the house of the advertising display company that we owned in LA. Back then, AdArt was pretty much like a family because Ray, the previous owner, had set it up that way. Jesus was the number 2 person under Ray, and Felipe worked under Jesus. Lydia, the bookkeeper, was the mother hen, den mother. She not only kept the books and did the payroll, she was also the one who kept track of the birthdays and the new babies. The silk screeners, artists, construction guys, and the women in the sewing shop were almost all of Hispanic origin. Workers about our age, or a little younger, when we bought the small existing business back in the middle 70s. They were probably all grandparents now. We thought they were all documented because we did the usual required inspection of their papers and checked their names against existing databases kept by the county. They all had valid driver's licenses or IDs with no outstanding citations, social security numbers, had taxes deducted from their paychecks, showed up for work every day, and were excellent, smart employees. We bought our first house in California at the same time we bought AdArt. It was not planned that way, but thank goodness we had Jesus and the other guys to help us with things that needed doing around the house. Fortunately, they were able to do just about anything, including masonry, simple electrical, plumbing, minor repairs. They worked at our house on slow days, and were paid extra when they came on Saturdays. Jesus and Felipe built the low sit-down bar in our family room. It was Jesus' idea to cover the front with thin brick slabs. When we put in a pool, they built the 6-inch brick retaining wall, separating the decking from the planted areas. After the big earthquake, they helped my housekeeper scrape the coagulated cooking oil, popcorn kernels, and dry cereals from the kitchen floor. My kids loved them and became happily their little helpers. They even learned some Spanish. When we moved the business into a larger building and upgraded the silk screening operation from manual squeegees to automated German machines, all the silk screeners were eager to learn the new system. When we modernized the process for building the false front marquees at the first-run theaters in Hollywood and Westwood, everyone was on board. I wonder if they would all be showing up for work today. They would not be the only ones missing from their jobs, afraid to leave the house, afraid to show up to cut the grass, trim the trees, clean the houses, serve up the fast food, finish building out new framing at construction sites, operate the sewing machines in the fashion district, trying to avoid being arrested or worse. One of the subcontractors who worked on updating the condominium recently purchased by my daughter and son-in-law, an uncle of their licensed and bonded contractor, will no longer show up for work. And my daughter has heard so many similar stories from friends who are trying to get work done on their homes caught in the Palisades fire. Where have the workers gone? Even the New York Times recently ran an article describing how communities are organizing to shop for groceries for neighbors feeling too threatened to venture out or pick up their children from school. Why is this happening? Who is this helping? It's one thing to hunt down true criminals or gang members who might need to be arrested and possibly deported after due process. But why seek out ordinary men and women who have been here for decades, going about their everyday lives? Just who does this administration think it is that traditionally greases the everyday wheels of the Southern California economy? Whose ego is being stroked by these arrests? By men, usually masked and without warrants or IDs. Trust me, few are criminals. They are people with families just going to work every day, trying to earn enough to provide for their families, maybe save enough to buy a small house, go to church and support their schools. I know, because I've worked with them and new workers like them for years. As my husband and I finalized our divorce, I was bought out of my half of AdArt, and it has long been sold. During my years spent moving from LA to DC to Tucson, I lost touch with our little work family. I pray for our former employees. I hope they are safely retired, enjoying their grandchildren, and their children are also safe. Most of them were born in this country. A few might have been brought as children. Leave them alone. And I'd like to introduce Bonnie Donis, who has written about the joys of traveling the North Rim of the Grand Canyon.
Thank you. Many sizzling summers ago, my husband Jack observed, "We've marveled at the Grand Canyon from this south rim, from the river below and from the air above. Let's go check out the north rim." That sounded good to me. And I added, on the way, we can lunch at the Rock Springs Cafe for pigs in heat, great barbecued pork, and delicious homemade pies. And let's break up the 535-mile drive by spending the first night at Flagstaff's Little America Inn. Wasn't long before our Ford Explorer was packed and we were headed north. From Little America, rather than take the familiar northwest route to the South Rim, we drove northeast, passing the extensive Cameron Trading Post and agreeing that we'd explore that on our return. At the Vermilion Cliffs, we turned west to the tiny, unincorporated town of Jacob Lake and lunched on toasted cheese sandwiches at the one and only restaurant there. We were now at 8,000 feet elevation, and the forest quickly dissolved into rolling grassland. I yelled, "Look, deer, a deer, at least a dozen of them. And aren't those bison grazing nearby?" After 45 miles of wildlife sightings, we entered the forest again. The road ended at the North Rim Lodge, surrounded by a number of rustic cabins. We registered, and from the long porch of the lodge, we're able to gaze into the Grand Canyon spread wide and deep below us. The floor-to-ceiling glass windows in the large dining room provided more glorious views. From our assigned cabin, it was only a short walk to the rim, or we could totally relax while rocking on the cabin porch. During our stay, we communed with nature as we hiked along the canyon and through the forest. We sometimes joined the resident ranger for talks and walks. He explained that the unique rodents that were scampering around us were kaibab squirrels and that they lived nowhere else in the world. We also learned that 90% of Grand Canyon tourists visit only the crowded South Rim. And we were happy to be part of the 10% that made it to the North Rim. After this first visit to the remote, peaceful other side of the canyon, we returned many times, sometimes accompanied by family or friends, but often just the two of us, escaping from the bustling outside world. The North Rim Lodge also became part of the memories from our rim-to-rim adventures. In 1990, Jack, his sister Carol, and son Brett completed their crossing of the canyon at the North Rim, where 4 years later, we 6 rim-to-rimmers, ladies, began our long trek. A few years ago, Jack and I joined a pleasure-bent tour that included some new-to-us vistas overlooking the Grand Canyon. We were also thrilled to spot several California condors soaring around the Vermilion Cliffs. And for 2 wonderful days, we again basked in the peace and beauty around the North Rim Lodge. Then one morning last month, a gloomy Jack greeted me with, "I have sad news." At our age, that's something we don't want to hear. Who now? But no, he was talking about the demise of our favorite retreat. Fire had destroyed the lodge and cabins at the North Rim. There are now only ashes, where Jack wanted his own ashes to be buried someday. The original North Rim Lodge was designed in 1927, but was destroyed by a kitchen fire in 1932. 5 years later, the lodge that Jack and I would grow to love opened for business. This year, the lodge and I both celebrated our 87th birthdays. Now one of us is gone. So Carol. Thank you. Now Carol Lefelt will tell us about an uncomfortable yoga experience.
Okay, just so you know, that's not me. But everybody had pictures, so now I have pictures too. Catherine called late Friday afternoon and cheerfully announced, "This is your chauffeur speaking. For the past hour, I'd been throwing clothes and toiletries into a suitcase and had placed a rolled-up sleeping bag with an extra pillow and blanket by the door. Instructed to bring along something that represented our creativity, I grabbed a few old Bringing Up Boys poems about the inevitable trips to emergency wards. We were off to an entire yoga weekend. Catherine and I had been attending a weekly after-school yoga class led by Alan Cohn, offered free to teachers in our district. This proved to be a great hour of midweek calm. Alan's mesmerizing voice helped us put aside the accumulated pressures of schedules, report cards, lesson plans, and faculty meetings. The only glitch was that we had to rush after our last class each Wednesday to get to the gym by 3:30, and then rush home afterwards to get dinner on the table. Not the best circumstances for yoga. When Alan described this retreat, we imagined stress-free sessions of blissful letting go and long walks in the woods. Catherine and I looked at each other and raised our hands to sign up. We pulled into the wooded fields of the retreat center. Brightly lit windows of a large old house welcomed us in from the dark. Incense hung heavily in the air, and soft flute sounds filled the room as the 40 participants carried their belongings through the front door. Catherine and I stuck on our name tags to our sweaters and carried our stuff to bedroom 3, which, to our dismay, we had to share with 6 other women. Alan called us into the living room where we packed into a circle on the periphery. I waited for him to start a yoga session. Instead, he began by describing our special destiny, a reason for the arrival of these particular 40 people, comparing us to the 10 victims of a bridge disaster in the novel The Bridge at San Luis Rey, in which flashbacks show they all have some connection to each other. Destiny? Fate? Collapsing bridges? I noticed people's eyes and mouths set in a determined, almost searching intensity. I didn't feel either determined or intense. Instead, I was getting increasingly rattled, particularly when we began what Alan called a song of jubilation. Then he directed us each to stand and explain why we had come. I began. I'm here because I need to relax and let go of the pressures I've been feeling lately. Alan smiled as his eyes moved to the next person. A very young woman with a sweet round face and long blonde hair spoke about gaining self-confidence and wanting to give others happiness rather than just taking it all the time. A young man said, I came to get more in touch with my creativity. Their continuing responses made me feel I had entered the Moonies Unification Church. I want to open up and become one with all of you. I want to find peace and love, to center myself and find grounding. Then began what he called a workshop. First, we simulated a hustle-bustle city full of anger, paranoia, and hostility. We stormed around the small room, pushing and shoving, with some participants glaring as they charged into me. Next, we created a peaceful, loving environment, strolling, hugging, and greeting each other with smiles and open hearts. I groaned inside as strangers wrapped their arms around me and pressed their cheeks to mine. The next activity was worse. We had to walk around and stare into each other's eyes. Then, of course, we shared reactions. I just felt so loving and giving, said Marta, an older woman who wore a bathrobe and slippers and was knitting something she kept ripping out and restarting. I just wanted to hug everybody so tightly. What am I doing here, I thought. Steve thrust his shoulders forward. I had to hold back. I could feel some people resisting my hugs, and I certainly don't want to impose myself on anyone. Amanda, I loved hugging everyone. Judith, actually, I found it easier to push and shove. After that came boxes, crayons, and scissors. Draw the self you present to the outside world on top of your box. Inside, draw your real self, what you experience as the inner, secret you. Then cut out a part of the top to reveal as much of your inner self as you are comfortable revealing. The torture continued until midnight. We formed groups, held hands, completed sentences about feelings, smiled and smiled and smiled. After a snack, we finally climbed to our communal bedrooms. I tossed and sweated in my sleeping bag all night long, listening to the springs in the upper bunks squeak and groan. Finally, I sensed a dim light outside and heard the gentle tinkling of sleigh bells. The Hare Krishna sect was coming to wake us up. Feet shuffled and people found their toothbrushes and warm-up suits while my head pounded, my eyes burned, and my throat felt chalky and sour. The bathroom had long lines of women in various stages of undress. While the intention was to increase intimacy, I felt like a 6-year-old at camp for the first time, wanting to write mommy and daddy and plead, "Take me home." We crammed into the little living room for yoga with our mats. We stretched and pulled, breathed and bounced, then meditated to Alan's gentle voice. Think of your most perfect self. Get in touch with your source, your guardian angel. You will never be more joyous, more whole, more perfect than you are now. My perfect self was experiencing an intense throbbing in its right eye, nauseating hunger, and lower back pain. I found Catherine sitting on her bed upstairs. "I didn't sleep so well last night," she mumbled. "Do you suppose we might leave after supper tonight?" After supper? I was ready to tie some sheets together right then and lower myself the 2 stories, walking all the way home if I had to. After breakfast, Catherine and I took a walk before the day's 3 workshops, tiptoeing through the sheep turds. The more we talked, the more we reinforced one another's dissatisfaction, but we committed to leaving after dinner. Back at the house, our new best friends were scattered around the living room floor, singing along with Alan, who strummed a guitar. I looked at Catherine. She looked at me. "Let's get the hell out of here," I whispered. "Definitely," she responded. We approached Alan. "This weekend isn't exactly what we expected. We're uncomfortable and think we should leave," I blurted. Smiling serenely, Alan insisted we do what pleased us and hugged us goodbye. We ran out of the room and packed in less than 5 minutes. We fumbled with our rolled-up sleeping bags, pillows, suitcases, and pocketbooks, while the smaller group settled in their circles and watched us clattering along. Each mouth formed the words, "What's wrong?" as we passed. Marta, the knitter, followed us to the door. "I'm so sorry you must go." She was almost in tears. "You must have some awful emergency." Catherine and I nodded vigorously, closed the door, and sped across the front lawn to our car. Maybe when this weekend occurred in the mid-'80s, we might have anticipated that it could include aspects of encounter groups with a sprinkling of New Age spiritualism. I thought these approaches had become extinct, but after reading a recent New York Times section covering weddings, it's called Vows, my jaw dropped. Quote, "The next day, in lieu of a rehearsal dinner, the couple hosted a workshop for 80 friends and a few family members, asking them to make eye contact, answer deep personal questions written by the couple, and do sound healing exercises." End quote. I'd prefer to spend the evening being waterboarded. And now I would like to introduce Maureen Hutter, who is going to help us all find inner peace.
Thank you. So my reason for inner peace is you all have been sitting for a long time. If you were at our first presentation, Barb helped me to take me out to the ball game. But to fit in with Carol's theme, we're going to do a brief yoga exercise. So I invite you to stand or sit tall in your seat, whatever is comfortable for you, or totally ignore me and do whatever. And, oh, can we have that picture back up? Neither of them is me. Nor had it ever been me, nor will it ever be me. But I do love yoga. And I think Carol loves it too. She just didn't get any that weekend. So, and this isn't for reals yoga, but just something to get us moving. And usually you would put your arms straight out, but you're all too close together for that. So just bring your arms down. And then with a deep breath, bring your arms up. And then release your breath and bring your arms down. And another, up and down. And a third one, and down. Now don't tell any of the yoga instructors what I did, but you should be a little bit more refreshed. And then I'm going to introduce our next presenter, Susan Kinlock, and she's going to talk to us about shock in Poland, 9/11/2001.
Thank you. I'm losing my voice, so therefore I have water. I became interested in Poland following news reports of the growth of Solidarity and Lech Wałęsa's role as a labor leader in the Gdansk shipyards, as well as the political turmoil throughout the Soviet Union. I lived in Berkeley, was able to audit classes at the University of California, and took advantage of that by attending 2 courses on current politics in Eastern Europe. The Berlin Wall fell in 1989. Poland became a republic in 1990, and I was fascinated by the changes taking place. I felt that it was time to pitch in and work toward the helping to build civil societies in the former Soviet Union. Valuable work was being done by Global Volunteers, an NGO under the UN based in the United States. They were asked by the new government to come to Poland to teach English, and the Stanford Alumni Association announced they would be joining them in a program in Poland. I jumped at the chance to be part of the team. Our group was met at the airport in Warsaw and taken to Remontówka, near Chilewska, a town between Warsaw and the Belarus border. You've read about it recently because there have been a lot of overflights of that area of Poland by Russia. The manor house was from the pre-communist days, purchased in 1926 by Władysław Raymond's widow from funds from his Nobel Prize in English Literature. The Communist Party had taken over the property in 1981 and used it as a place for apparatchiks. After Polish independence, it was used as a rest house for scientists and artists and was to be my home for 3 weeks. We were each given a private room with bath, very luxurious. The only problem was that I had to learn to cover the toilet, as there was no trap to stop the sewer gases from making a very funky smell in the room. All right. Whose phone is that? Our program began with introductions of the staff in Poland, the coordinator from Global Volunteers, and the professor representing Stanford. Most of us would be teaching English at various local schools. Some were going to an orphanage, and others still to a prison. I was to teach English in 2 different elementary schools, as well as tutoring 2 high school students who were preparing for college placement. On Monday, September 10th, I learned how the local school system operated and was given suggestions for organizing my classes and began lesson plans for the following day. The morning of Tuesday, September 11th, another volunteer and I loaded into a car. Do we have the car? Did the car already show up? Yes. Oh, let's stay there for a minute. This is one of my colleagues, as tall as I, trying to get into the car. You can see the problem. Our driver had to start the car with a wrench. The wrench held the key to an on position, while he used a metal rod from the boot to hand crank the little car. Some of you are old enough to remember cars that had to be hand cranked. The crank provided a spark to the engine and avoided having to rely on an electric starter, which was not available in cars made in Poland during the years under USSR. Riding in the tiny Polish cars was difficult for us tall Americans, as we had to squeeze in and suffer the result of jammed knees. Our scariest driver was a nun. We feared she believed she had divine protection and drove like a bat out of hell. She refused to slow, let alone stop at train crossings. There had been a fatal accident just days before, so riding with the flying nun made us pray for our own protective angels. My first school was Dabrowska. The principal, Christina, and secretary, Barbara, offered us tea and cookies in exchange for an informal English lessons. We spent part of every day huddled in Christina's small office, bending over our dictionaries, Polish and English. And gradually, we built a small vocabulary. After the adult English lessons, we were taken to our classrooms. Mine was a boisterous group of kids, about 7 or 8. I've taught in many situations, but I knew this was going to be a challenge, as I had no Polish and they had no English. We began with introductions, the first one. Let's see if I can clothe myself here. I say, a student comes up and that's Carl. I say, my name is Mrs. Kinlock. Carl says, my name is Mrs. Kinlock. So I show him his name tag, and then we get it right. So it took a little while, but they got it. And it soon, they loved this little lesson, and as soon as the protocol became clear to them, they wanted to learn. They were used to being held down by a large authoritarian boot, demanding silence and rote learning. So when I walked in, it was at first a free-for-all. For a time, I soon got them started with activities they found engaging, and the class settled down to work. At the end of the day, the afternoon of 9/11, we arrived back to the manor in our little car to find Dorota, our leader from Poland, running frantically toward us. She told us that a plane had just hit a tower of the World Trade Center. And we rushed in just in time to see a plane hit the second tower. All the news was in Polish, so Dorota translated as quickly as she could. We needed an English speaker. Fortunately, one of the volunteers had a technical background and found a way to shinny up the TV tower and hook up CNN in English. Disbelief, numbness, fear, anger washed over me. I continued my job, but spent every fear-free moment glued to the television, watching the scenes play over and over on the television. Armed guards were placed around our manor house. Turned out the Americans were not in danger, so they didn't stay long. Gradually, I began to settle into this new reality. A bus trip to Warsaw was arranged for Saturday. What greeted us was the sidewalk around the American embassy, covered with flowers and candles. We then visited the old town square, reconstructed after the bombing during World War II. Yes. There was a cafe, and as we approached the royal castle, where we were to have a tour, several of us lamented that we wished we could sit in the square and decompress over a coffee. But that was not to be. We were herded around the extensive castle by a loquacious guide who droned on enthusiastically about every detail of the reconstructed building. Some of us were so tired and jangled that we began nervously laughing in the background. And we were soon making a disturbance which upset our Polish guide. Looking back on our unwittingly American disrespect for the wonders of Polish reconstruction, it is clear to me that we're finally letting out some of the repressed emotions from 9/11. The day ended with a reception and a dinner for Stanford alums. That's something Stanford always does when they take a trip. Wherever they're going, they invite any alums who live in that neighborhood. I talked extensively with Joanna Sezima, a journalist from Solidarity. She had spent 7 years in jail because of her writings for Solidarity. She also had fond memories of Stanford, as she had received the Knight Foundation for Fellowship for Journalism. She was in tears as we talked about 9/11. She reflected that the people who were able to call from their cell phones in the doomed planes spoke of love as the most important thing they needed to say. Thank you. I now have the pleasure of introducing Fran McNeely, who's going to read about the Plaza Athena. Oh, you want that? Okay.
Hello. Plaza Athénée and the summer of 1971. What was Paris like during the summer of 1971? As a 19-year-old college student, I was soon to find out. I began by traveling from my small town in western Pennsylvania to Paris, certainly not direct, which contributed to the adventure. My mother and cousin dropped me off at the front entrance to the Pittsburgh airport, kissed me goodbye, and then I was on my own. I had never flown before, let alone been in a large airport, but I soon figured out what to do with my luggage, how to locate my gate, the chartered flight group I was flying with from Pittsburgh to Cleveland and on to Frankfurt, and eventually ending up in Paris. I arrived in Paris nearly 48 hours later, but our journey was still not complete. We consulted our maps to figure out how to ride the Paris metro to the stop closest to the boarding house where we would be staying. We then walked the final blocks carrying our suitcases. Only 4 of us remained during this final leg of the journey, and we were quite noticeable walking down the streets of Paris, looking very American in our jeans, carrying our hard-sided Samsonite luggage, speaking English, and looking a little unkempt. We arrived at the boarding house at 32 Rue du Général Bertrand in the 7th arrondissement and rang the doorbell. The large wooden door opened, and several nuns dressed in full-length black habits greeted us. The nuns spoke only French, so as soon as we were greeted, our French lessons began. They were expecting us and immediately collected our entire 3 months of rent. They then explained the meal schedule, where the bathrooms and showers were, and the hours we could come and go from the boarding house. No males allowed, no loud noise. Finally, we were shown to our individual rooms where we all collapsed and slept for hours. My room on the 3rd floor was about 12 by 14 feet with a window that opened into a garden courtyard below. The windows had shutters that could be closed for privacy, but no glass and no screens. Along with that shuttered window, often with a view of the moon, my room had a single bed, a desk, an armoire, a sink, and a bidet. The boarding house, built in 1918, had 1 toilet on every floor and showers in the basement. Even though we were accustomed to better facilities back home, we soon adjusted. Since the boarding house was not air-conditioned, I often kept the shutters and the door into the hallway open to allow more air to circulate. One afternoon, sprawled across my bed and studying French verbs, a woman walked down the hall. She was a new boarder and a bit older than me and obviously American. Recognizing other Americans was a skill quickly acquired in Paris. Was it the clothing, the hair, the shoes? I'm not sure what set us apart, but I introduced myself to this woman and spoke to her in English. Where are you from? Why are you here? How long will you be staying? She was a French teacher from Philadelphia in Paris for a few weeks to brush up on her French and have a bit of a summer vacation. Her boyfriend and his best friend, both bankers from Philadelphia, would be arriving in a few days. We had a great time getting to know each other and seemed to have some things in common, even though I was still a student and she was a young professional. A day or two later, she asked if I wanted to go on a double date with her boyfriend and his friend from Philly. Sure, I said. Where are we going? To the Plaza Athénée, she tells me. What is that? I asked, a little bewildered. I was soon to discover the Plaza Athénée was a luxurious and well-known restaurant and hotel in Paris. Even as a fit young woman like moi, carrying my own luggage through multiple airports and then all over Paris, I could not spare packing a dressy outfit to wear to what I was soon to learn was a 5-star restaurant. Among the few things I had packed, and my best outfit, was a knit belted dress and a pair of platform shoes. The dress rolled into a ball about the size of a grapefruit and was easy to pack. And at that time, I wore platform heels everywhere. The evening of our double date, I put on my dress, my shoes, and we were off to the Plaza Athénée in a cab. All 4 of us managed to squeeze into a vehicle about the size of a bathtub. We unfolded ourselves out of the cab, readjusted our clothing, the women in dresses and the bankers in their suits and ties, and walked into the hotel. The restaurant on the 1st floor of the hotel was a very large room with an indoor garden. Smells coming from the dining room were not of food, but of flowers and greenery in the courtyard. We settled into what seemed to be an exotic setting and began studying the menu. We were soon served an aperitif. I did not know what an aperitif was at 19, with alcohol not legal at that age in the US, so I doubly enjoyed the taste of the drink. We ordered our 4-course meal, drank bottles of wine, finished with dessert, and then a digestive. The meal was a classic French dinner, served by waiters formally dressed and very comfortable serving foreigners, particularly those speaking French. By the conclusion of the meal, I was a bit tipsy, and even more so when I learned the bill came to over $250 for the 4 of us, what my family had recently paid for a used car. After months of studying French and certainly no more meals at the Plaza Athénée, it was time to return home. I clearly remember not wanting to return, but that idea was just a dream. So at the end of August, we reversed our route back to the US. By then, I was a seasoned traveler and had acquired a taste for French food. Returning home to my small town and college in Western Pennsylvania was a major adjustment after a summer in Paris. Years later, Rick and I returned to the boarding house. It was now a retirement home, much like the Hacienda. My French was still good enough to explain to the person at the front door, no longer a nun, my history with the building and why I wanted to see what the building and courtyard now looked like. The windows were not covered in shutters, but fitted with glass, cranked open to the flower-filled courtyard below, a quiet outdoor space in a large, noisy city. The interior of the property had been completely renovated with few remaining features from its 1918 construction. Later that day, Rick and I went to the Hotel Plaza Athénée, but decided against a meal there. $250 in 1970s dollars for a similar meal in 2010 remained well beyond our travel budget. But during the summer of 1971, I experienced a meal and months to remember that remain vivid in my mind. I no longer can recall the name of my date, his friend, nor the name of the French teacher from Philadelphia, but nearly everything else from that evening and that summer are as clear as a night in Paris with a full moon shining right outside my window. And what a wonderful memory. Thank you, thank you. And now we're leaving Paris and we're going to have an adventure in Zurich by Marty Levy.
As the last reader, I want to thank you all for being here, you're supportive of us. Thank you again to Community Life, who had more than a few challenges this morning. And of course, special thanks to Sandy Butler for her expert teaching, her vast knowledge of writing, and her exquisite empathy and encouragement. It's the summer of 1988. My son Mitch, Barb, and I are on our way home to Tucson after touring Italy for a couple of weeks with our older son Doug, and then dropping him off to spend a year or so in Florence as his home base. He has recently graduated from the University of Arizona as an art major with an emphasis on sculpture. And he wants to spend a year experiencing the place where art was born and where food is sublime. One of his first steps was to enroll in an Italian language school, where he will take formal classes and live with an Italian family while he studies. It's a little scary for all four of us. A new country, a new situation, a prolonged absence, and a foreign language. But with a hug and a lump in my throat, I say goodbye. Then Barb and Mitch do the same as Doug's train leaves the Venice train station for Florence. Our plane has a stopover in Zurich, and we stay overnight at a hotel not far from the airport. We have time for dinner before leaving the next day, so we search out a place to eat, beginning with an inquiry at the hotel about some possibilities to choose from. As we walk down a one-way street, we find a cab that will take us to a restaurant of our choice. The cabbie tells us we're headed in the wrong direction, but it's no problem. The cabbie shifts into reverse and we go backward toward the restaurant at about 30 miles an hour. The food is fine, and we return to our modern yet stately hotel. Then we decide to take a walk and explore that area of Zurich, having never been to Switzerland. Barb returns to our room in order to get a sweater, so Mitch and I wander around as we wait for her. It's quiet outside the hotel in an enclosed cobblestone area with the hotel walls on one side and a canyon of walls, walkways, and exits on the other sides. Mitch and I search around the area to see what we can find, but there's no one to ask. That's when we look around and we see a young woman appearing to be in her 20s. She is attractive and dressed in red and would certainly stand out in any crowd. Although this crowd includes only the three of us, Mitch and me, and of course her. She has long dark hair and an outfit that includes a very low-cut top and an extremely short mini skirt along with 6-inch high heels. She looks over her shoulder, makes eye contact with each of us, and nods her head coyly in our direction. She then moistens her lips with her tongue, approaches us, and says, "Trixie? Trixie?" Mitch and I look at each other in amazement. We quickly discern that Trixie is not her name. If there had been any doubt about Trixie's line of work, even before she said anything, it was already abundantly clear. I look at Mitch and he looks at me, both speechless, both experiencing a flood of thoughts. The lapse in time feels like 20 minutes, but I suspect it was more like 20 seconds. Just enough time to ask myself, what do I say to my 19-year-old son in a situation like this? I recover from my bewilderment, and in a stage whisper, I say to Mitch, "Well, that would certainly be one way for a father and son to bond." So I lost my place after that. Mitch has trouble controlling his laughter, as do I, but we regain our composure, and with that, we politely decline Trixie's invitation. We share the experience we just had with Barb after she returns to the scene, and we still joke about it to this day, 36 years later, especially whenever Barb and I meet a woman named Trixie.
Are you sure you did not bond that night with your son? What a wonderful experience. And Barbara, too bad you weren't there to enjoy it as well. Well, thank you. Yes. We apologize to everybody for the delay. Thank you for your patience. We hope you've had a good time, as much fun as we have. We love telling the stories and memories of our lives, and we hope you'll come back again next year when you can hear more stories from the days of our lives. Thank you. Thank you very much.